If you want to get better, go to where the best climbers are. It's not about the highest grade you climb, it's how great you climb every individual climb. Hey, how's it going? My name's AJ and I've been bouldering for over a year and a half now. And this is my story and journey of how bouldering has changed me both physically and mentally. What got me into bouldering? Well, growing up, I actually was not really into sports or anything like that. If anything, I was more of a gamer, so I'd always have a creative interest in games and things like that. And what I've noticed about this sport is that this is a physical activity that sparks interest in creatives. And I think this has a lot to do with the grading system. It has that same feeling of being rewarded after completing a difficult task in a game. It's almost like you're leveling up yourself. And this is something that kept me coming back. You go in the gym and you're solving a puzzle with your body. Sometimes it's challenging, and when you complete it, there's that same rush and exciting feeling of completing a difficult task in a video game. Now, did I exercise previous to bouldering? I did on and off throughout my life. I'd have different phases of being physically active, going to the gym and lifting weights. Before I got into bouldering, I did have an interest in calisthenics. So I was doing more body weight exercises, getting used to pull-ups. I actually had a pull-up bar in my home at that time, so I do a lot of pull-ups, and I think that strength helped me a little bit in the beginning of my journey, but not so much. I was still new to the holds and finger strength aspect of bouldering. So since I was into calisthenics in the beginning of my journey, I was really into the physique of the calisthenics athletes. I really wanted a leaner build, and I've been shedding a lot of weight at this time. I was on my own weight loss journey. After heavily being into gaming and not being physically active, I put on a lot of weight after COVID, so I really wanted to change my life around. It was around this time I was living in Seoul, South Korea. And if you know anything about Seoul, South Korea, bouldering is very, very popular there. They have hundreds of gyms just in Seoul, and luckily one day a certain gym caught my attention because it was placed right where I was staying in Gangnam. So I think the easiest way to cover and track my journey from the beginning is actually go into Instagram and go into my archives all the way back to the beginning of my journey. And this was the beginning of March 2024. If I go to March 7th here, you could see I have my rental shoes in the gym in Gangnam, Seoul gym in Gangnam. I say I finally tried climbing and accidentally did this advanced level first. I believe this was like a V3 at the time. So I was super psyched that I even got a V3, and I'm climbing it absolutely terrible. I'm hanging completely using my upper body strength, and that's okay. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of beginners do in the beginning of the journey, is think that bouldering is all about upper body strength, and it actually is not. It actually has way more to do with your feet than your arms, I would say. Of course, like upper body strength and finger strength plays a huge role in later grades, but I think your feet are just as important. I remember after that first day of bouldering, what really stuck me with it was I had been going to the gym previously in a phase 5 days a week, and the push-pull, getting sore with different muscle groups every week, that felt very repetitive to me. It wasn't really fun. And I was having so much fun in the bouldering gym. Like, I actually wanted to stay there longer, but I couldn't, because if you know about your first day in bouldering, usually your hands can't handle it. So I was only able to handle about 1 hour in the gym before my hands gave out. But I wanted to keep climbing. It was so addicting to me. And that was a feeling that I never got in a normal gym. And also the day after, my full body was completely sore, from my legs to my arms to my chest to my core. And this is something that didn't happen for me often in a normal gym, and I couldn't believe that it was happening while I was having fun in a climbing gym. So as I progressed through my journey in the beginning stages of climbing, when you start a video game, you want to figure out how to get better. How do you get better? I want to complete the harder climbs. I want to rush to the harder climbs. And then what happens is you end up what they call grade chasing, which is trying to do the harder climbs regardless of what it takes, regardless of your technique. That not only could be dangerous, but it's not really helping you grow as a climber. So if I were to give any tips to people in the beginning of their journey, it's, be on the easier climbs and take your time really learning technique. Foot placement, smearing, drop knees, how to extend your reach, getting your hips close to the wall, things like that. A lot of those things, a lot of people who are more experienced would tell me, but they would kind of go in one ear and out the other. And I'd just be like, okay, let me just get on the wall, So if I were to go back, I would say pay more attention to technique, because that will pay off later in your journey 100%, and it'll help your progress speed up. Because if you learn the proper techniques and get strong with the techniques and do the climbs slower, you will build more strength in those techniques, which will help you breeze through the problems later on. This post here says, I can't even grip these, so difficult at my level. And yeah, that's something that you realize too when you go to the higher grades. Your hands are not ready for these holds, these slopers, these pinches, these crimps, and that's something you can't rush. It takes a very, very long time to build tendon strength and grip strength. And that's something that you can't just go to the gym or use weights to speed up the process, because building tendon strength is not like muscle strength. Muscle strength, they tear and they repair over and over again. I think tendons take much longer time. There's a lot of videos on that. You could talk about that for hours of different ways to improve your finger and tendon strength. But all I do know is that it takes years. And even with me, I'm just now being able to do hangboard training and campus certain routes in overhang, and I wouldn't be able to do that in the beginning of my journey. If anything, if I rush that process, which a lot of the climbers I know try to do those things early, end up injuring themselves. They have wrist injuries, they have tendon injuries in their fingers, which ultimately slows down their progress, because now they can only climb with one hand, or they're not climbing at all, waiting to heal, instead of training on the easier grades. If you know anything about Korean gyms, these aren't gyms that are more about traditional climbing. If anything, it's more about modern climbing. What I mean by that is a lot of dynamic setting, doing coordination moves, giant holds that are pretty easy to grip and catch yourself with. And I didn't know about the different bouldering styles from the beginning, like slabs, dynos, overhang. Just because you're good in one thing doesn't mean you're good at being an overall climber. And that's something you'll learn along the journey too, is that you could focus on one aspect of bouldering, one certain style, but then you'll be neglecting another side. So it's important to do levels of climbing, not only in the style you're most comfortable with, but also to do styles that you're uncomfortable with, so you can be more of a well-rounded climber. So let's say you don't really like climbs that involve a lot of balance, so you stick to the routes that are very focused on finger strength and arm strength and hanging, overhang. You'll get better in that, but you won't progress in balance and hip mobility that slab climbing gives you. So in the beginning of your journey, definitely focus on being more of a well-rounded climber, rather than focusing on one area that's your favorite, because you don't want to be a V6 climber in overhang and not being able to do a V2 in slab. For me, slab is still my weakness, and I have to force myself to get on those climbs. But I do notice, if I were to go back to the beginning of my journey, I'd focus on slab a little more. Because what I've learned too is that slab climbing can really help your technique, which ultimately helps you even in the other areas of climbing. So doing slabs can actually help your foot placement in overhang and other parts of the wall. So as I'm looking at day 14 in this May 17th post, I'm doing a coordination climb, and you can see I'm very shaky with my movements. I'm just rushing to the top. I'm not really learning along the way. I'm just like, whatever it takes to get to the top, I don't care how I get there. I think that's the wrong approach, and I'm filming it, which is good, because now I can look at this even a year and a half later and see everything I'm doing wrong. But I remember at that moment, I was so excited to upload the climb and didn't realize my mistakes. So it's good to record yourself and review your mistakes, even if you're looking at them a year later. I think that's very important, to track your progress, see what you're doing wrong, because when you're on the wall, sometimes your head is so focused on the climb, you don't realize what your body is doing. You don't realize where your feet are. You don't realize if you're looking kind of shaky in a certain part of the climb. So it's good to film yourself so you can look back and be like, oh, this is what I could work on. Not only for posting on Instagram. Around May 25th, the end of May, that's when I got my first ever injury, and it was spraining my ankle in Korea. And this is when I really learned about body awareness while falling, not only climbing. People talk about climbing technique and things like that, but there also is falling technique, which I'm still learning a lot about that. How to not injure yourself, how to fall when it comes to certain sketchy climbs. Sometimes you're not aware of how your feet are, and while you're falling, you can land on your ankle, and your full body weight is pretty much crushing your ankle, and that can end up bad. So definitely be aware of how your body is even when you're falling. Practice different falls. I've been talking about this to a lot of people recently because I've run into a lot of climbers with injuries. It seems like freak accidents, but I think if we learn how to fall and learn how to position our bodies mid-fall or jump off a climb before it gets too sketchy, we can save ourselves a lot of injury. And lucky for me, that wasn't a severe sprained ankle. I was still able to heal it within a week and be back in the gym, which I remember that was all I could think about when I was injured, is when's the next time I'm going to be back in the gym. And that's another thing too that sped up my process, was my consistency going to the gyms. I would go to the gym 2 times a week. That's what my body could handle. And then when I felt like I could handle a bit more, 3 times a week in the climbing gym. And that's definitely important for progressing in anything you do in life, is consistency. You can't expect to get better if you're going to the gym once a month. You can't even expect to get better going to the bouldering gym 4 times a month. I think this is a sport that takes consistently going, not every day. Definitely have rest days, but you'll find that you can do different things and work on different walls. So if you're feeling really sore in certain areas, then you can go to the slab wall and work on different techniques, so you're not overloading certain muscles. Go to the gym as much as you can. And what helped me is that I genuinely loved bouldering, so it wasn't a problem for me to stay in the gym and want to go back all the time, because it was constantly on my mind, still to this day. And that's how I know I really enjoy it. I spent 8 months in Korea climbing and working and progressing in different skills. And one thing I really love doing too was watching the Korean climbers. A lot of them are really good, whether male or female. I remember I'd go into the Instagram pages of the gyms and I'd go through the tagged photos and look at what certain climbs people have done, and I'd look at the ones that were the most intriguing to me, and I'd screen record to save those routes, so when I went to the gym the following day, I can kind of look at their beta, kind of their way of doing the problem, to help me map out my own way of getting up the wall or following their moves. And that really helped me too, because I'm more of a visual learner. I love just watching really good climbers climb and seeing if I can kind of emulate their movements and pick up different styles from how they move on the wall. And that's what's so interesting, is the more you get into climbing, you see different strengths and weaknesses with other people, and you can kind of pick and pull different things from different styles and ultimately create your own style. But this is definitely a sport, even though it's more about yourself and your own journey, it's still a community of people, and we're all striving for our own personal progress. So a lot of people will be cool in the gym with sharing beta with you, helping you on your own journey and completing your own climb. That's what I really love about this sport too, is that I was in Korea and I'm not fluent in Korean, and a lot of Koreans don't really speak English, but I'd be in the gym climbing my climb and they'd be cheering in their language for me to get to the top. And that was such a good feeling, especially when you send it and the whole gym is watching and clapping for you and they don't even know how to communicate with you. It's still a worldwide language when people genuinely are excited for you and cheering you on. And that's something that I never understood the feeling of because I wasn't in sports growing up. That feeling kept me coming back to the gym as well, is the very supportive community wherever I was in the world. And speaking of wherever I was in the world, after my Korean journey came to an end, I did move to Japan for a little bit because I did want to start exploring more into the bouldering scene. And I always heard about Japan. I always heard the best climbers come from Japan. If you want to get better, go to where the best climbers are, and you'll find out why they're the best climbers. And I learned that when I went to Tokyo. But I am from California, and before I went to Tokyo, I did a quick trip to California. This was a big lesson for me too. The only place I'd ever climbed was Korea. And as I told you before, Korea is known for dynamic climbing, coordination moves. I went to California. California is not about that. California is more about traditional rock climbing. And this is something I realized I was V0 in, pretty much. So I got to the gyms all cocky. Oh, I can do V4s in Korea. Boom, I'm gonna flash these problems in California. That was the opposite. I had to relearn climbing in a way. And this is what introduced me to cave climbing and overhangs and holds that felt like rocks and tiny crimps at weird angles. And this is when I really knew that, yeah, I can be good in a certain aspect of climbing, but am I good at this? So my California trip was about that. I met some people there and again learned from the different gyms from Los Angeles to the Bay Area where I'm from. After realizing I need to get better finger strength, I went back to Korea. And there's one gym in Korea that has a kilter board. And this is what introduced me into board climbing. Board climbing is similar to traditional rock climbing, where it's more focused on technique at an angled wall that's set at 45 degrees, which is the most popular degrees. And you have to climb up with these not so good holds. There's no giant jugs for you to grab on. It's really about working on your finger strength and technique going up these certain routes. And this was completely new to me. Regardless of if it was new to me and it wasn't my favorite at the time, I knew it's something I needed to work on. So if you have a board in your gym, in your local gym, definitely take advantage of that to get stronger in that type of climbing, because that will ultimately help you in so many different areas of surpassing V4 to V5 and V6, because the holds only get smaller and the angles only get more steeper. So this will train you for these kind of routes. So through August, September, October, I was in Korea. September 21st, I was still practicing on the kilter board. I could see my technique was getting better, but I noticed I could barely do V2, V3s at a 45-degree angle. But I just kept wanting to get better. I was like, I want to speed up this process. How do I do this? I need to get stronger. I booked a trip to Japan. September 29th, I flew and landed in Tokyo. And this introduced me to the gyms that really changed my whole climbing journey, B-Pump. What is B-Pump? B-Pump are probably Japan's most famous climbing gyms for being the hardest gyms in the world. And you learn that Japan's national climbing team, which are some of the goats of the whole IFSC, train in these gyms. There are two B-Pump gyms I wanted to go back and forth, and that was B-Pump Ogikubo and B-Pump Tokyo in Akihabara. Now, I haven't talked a lot about the grading system in bouldering. It goes from V0 to, up there V14. It scales pretty high in different gyms. In my current home gym, I believe it goes up to V8-ish. Around. In Japan, now their grading system, they use Q and Dan. 8Q, 7Q, 6Q, 5Q, 4Q, all the way 1Q, and then it goes the Dan, which is like for professionals. But one thing that everyone talks about in Japan is how strict their grading system is. At this time, I was a comfortable V4 climber in my favorite styles, but their V4 is around the white level, which they call 3Q, and it's white tape.
Oh my God. Well, that is hard. Everything is hard. I just thought they all looked easy. When I looked at them, I was like, I'm gonna do this one, I'm gonna do that one. But then when I get on them, I'm like, they're so much harder than it looks. I think that's something to keep in mind for the viewers too. Like, these boulders are it's just weird, the style,
Everyone that climbs this level would say it's equivalent to V6, V8, depending on if you go to Ogikubo or Akihabara, because there's definitely some white tapes that are harder than others. But Japanese, they call this V4. So they're very, very strict. If you go to the lower grades even, they feel like V4s in Western, and they'll call that V1 or V2. This will humble you completely as a climber, knowing that Japanese are like this in every aspect of Japan culture. Very strict, very precise with everything they do. You learn that about climbing in Japan because they're very particular in these gyms about the route setting and the grading system. And I think when you do this in a community and that community continues to boulder at your gyms, they're going to become really good climbers. So I wanted to experience that. I spent 3 months in Japan. In the beginning, I was falling off red tags, which were 5Q. I was warming up on the others, the pink, the green, the yellow. But my first hill to cross was 5Q. You'll notice when you go to different gyms all over that route setters have different styles, walls feel different. If you make a quick trip to a gym, you may realize that you haven't learned that style and you may feel weaker because of it, but a lot of the time that has to do with just being new to a certain style of setting. And the regulars that come to those gyms, they know that style completely. So it's definitely a mix of that mentality, but also that these gyms are challenging. So after I got used to the style of the 5Q in B pump and I was able to send them, I wanted to work my way and see how far I can go in 3 months. So of course I was hunting a blue tag 4Q. In this post on October 2nd, I said the majority of holds in Ogikubo are slippery. And yeah, this is true. It almost feels like these holds, they don't wash down and they've been there for years. They're older, but it makes the gripping of them so difficult. So even though the climbs look a bit easy, a lot of people will go into these gyms, touch the holds and be like, wow, these kind of have no texture on them, which is good because I feel it makes you stronger. People talk about bad holds all the time, and that could sound like such a negative thing. But if you get good at bad holds, you become a better climber, because the higher the grades go, the worse the holds become. And that's something to learn about this sport. The easier climbs will have really good holds. They'll feel like you're on monkey bars at a gym, or you're climbing up a ladder in the lowest grades. As you progressively get into the harder grades, you are gripping onto pretty much nothing, which is so impressive by professional climbers that they can do very, very insane climbs holding on to a sloper that has no grip or a crimp that's so tiny and make it look like a V4. October 6th, a blue tape I attempted many times, but will come back for this. This was the time when I was tackling the blue tags and I realized how tricky they are. It took me multiple attempts. So I was projecting blue tag in these gyms, which I believe they call V3. But what's important about the B-Pump gyms is that even though it is V3, they say blue tag is the beginning of your intermediate climbing. So I really wanted to be a consistent blue tag climber, which would mean I'm officially an intermediate climber in Japan. And when you get that rank in Japan, I feel like it feels more important than anywhere else, because you'll go in these gyms and you'll see people climbing the highest level grades and you'll just be so impressed with how they got there. What was their journey like? You hear these climbers have been climbing over 10 years and they're still chasing higher grades. And that's so inspiring to me because the journey really never ends. You kind of have a goal in your head, oh, I'll be happy when I become a V10 climber. But you meet a V10 climber and they're looking at the V13 climbers the same way. So the journey never ends. You just want to be the strongest version of yourself, and that can take a lifetime. October 9th, blues only today. So I finally was sending blue tags. I was learning the Akihabara B-Pump way. But I noticed when I went to Ogikubo, the blue tags in Tokyo Akihabara were feeling like red tags in Ogikubo. So Ogikubo definitely is a harder gym. The setting there is even more intense. And when you go into those gyms, you'll see the national climbers more so. That's where I saw Miho Nanaka. That's where I saw Mao Nakamura. That's where I saw Sorato and Raku. You understand why those gyms are good enough for the Japan national team, because I'd even see a lot of the professional climbers coming from all over the world falling off of white tags, which were V4, and that made me realize, okay, it humbles even them. But as you progress in your climbing journey, you start to realize that the grading system, it really doesn't matter. Like, even in Japan, they use it to say, yeah, this climb is getting harder, but every climb has its own problems and the possibilities are really endless. There was a climber that told me it's not about the highest grade you climb, it's how great you climb every individual climb, whether it's easy or hard. You can tell a good climber by even how he climbs a V2, how slow, how fluid, how perfect they are in their technique. That's how you can tell who's a great climber. Not someone who campused a V4 that were all jugs. So these are things that you see really professional climbers working on. I would see people in Ogikubo warming up on the white tags and they'd be doing them so slowly. And I was wondering what the purpose of that was. But now that I know, a year and a half into climbing, what they're doing was really refining their technique and making the most of every single movement from this hold to this hold, rather than just focusing on getting the top. I was making Japan vlogs of my journey, and I think people really enjoyed these because the way I'd caption them was a beginner in the world's hardest gyms. And I think that was very relatable to a lot of climbers that came into B Pump. Because of the attraction of B Pump to the bouldering community, you'd run into foreigners all the time from all over the world. And I'd talk to them, I'd ask them what brought them to Japan. They really came for B Pump. They didn't come for the sushi, they didn't come for the ramen, they didn't come for Japan's gaming culture. They came for these gyms. So that goes and shows you just how powerful the bouldering addiction is, but also the curiosity of the Japanese B Pump gyms. So I was making these vlogs, meeting different people, working on the white tags now at this point. And I was so pumped on doing a white tag and doing the comp wall in Ogikubo, learning from watching these Japanese climbers. That's why I'd spend so much time in the gym. I'd watch people, not only climbing myself, but learning from watching all these amazing Japanese climbers and climbers from all over the world visiting these gyms. Speaking of watching climbers, this is a clip of me projecting a blue tag in Ogikubo. This one had some very crazy moves. You have to actually grip the wall, which this wall feels like stone. I think it's actually made of concrete. It has a very sketchy crimp on top of a sloper. I was really struggling with this problem doing this for multiple days. And then Mao Nakamura comes in one day and she warms up on it, making it look like a V2. And that's when I realized, wow, I have a long way to go. The skill gap is insane. And a lot of these climbers that have been climbing since they've learned how to walk in Japan, I'll never reach that level, but I'm inspired to get as close as I can. So it was amazing climbing side by side these amazing climbers in the same gym. I learned so much from that. Those are memories and experiences that you cannot buy. You just have to be there. You have to go to Japan, to go to these countries. There's no learning experience like that. I wouldn't have learned that if I stayed in California or stayed in Korea. And that's why I love bouldering in different countries so much, because I learned so much from every adventure. Eventually, I sent the blue tag with the help of talking to some people in the gym and watching different betas, different techniques from other strong climbers. And then I proceeded on my white tag hunt. There was a specific white tag after I'd sent the comp wall in Ogikubo, which was another big feat for me because it was like a white tag on the comp wall and it had a crazy dynamic movement. I still have it on the top of my Instagram because I'm so proud of that moment and it meant so much to me. Even though these 10-year-old Japanese kids were doing it like it was their daily playground, they're just sending it and they're like half my size. I still felt proud of myself for sending that. And you can even see like the adrenaline, the coffee was pumping through my body before the last move and I got it. But there's a specific white tag that I wanted to do in B Pump Akihabara, and it was on the rooftop area, which is extremely cool floor of B Pump, and it was red hold. And I really wanted to project this because I really loved the movements. It was what I'd say my style because it had that first dynamic backwards jump, and it was something that reminded me of Korea, but and then it ends with these awkward crimps that you kind of have to campus up to and get your hip mobility on these holds and kind of bend to the side and press your body against the final hold. Over 100 attempts and multiple days of coming onto the rooftop, regardless of the Japanese weather. There was a group of people around and it was a good day where I felt really strong and I sent it. And I have that video if you guys want to check it out. But I learned a lot from just projecting that problem. And projecting in general is so important in this sport because you can learn a lot from a problem that's above your grade. And if it's a problem that you feel comfortable with and it's not too dangerous or sketchy, do it over and over. It made me stronger in those movements. I'd come back stronger every day, even though from the first attempt I could barely do the first move. I saw the progress slowly and I learned from people watching it. And that specific problem taught me that I was capable of greater climbs. That was the biggest lesson when I finally sent it. By the end of it, I felt like a different climber. Even if it was only in that style, it still taught me that I can do this. I became stronger because of the repetition of the movements from one move to the next. So yeah, that was a great time. After then, I had met B Pump staff and other climbers in the gym. My next goal before I left Japan after staying there for 3 months was a light blue tag, which is Nikyu 2Q. I learned that's extremely hard and I was grade chasing because I felt rushed, but I realized that that was a gap in itself, and I wasn't ready. But that led me to a curiosity of another place, Bangkok. It was my first time going to Thailand, and I'd heard and seen clips of this gym, this big gym. This gym is called Stonegoat. What really intrigued me about this gym in particular was their massive comp wall. And comp climbs became my favorite, especially because being in B-Pump Okikubo and being a fan of IFSC, watching them on TV, wishing I could do all those moves. Being in a comp wall in a gym is the closest feeling of being a comp climber. So I love practicing the style, and the moves look so cool. And when you send them and look back at the video and you're like, wow, I did that. That's what I love about comp climbing. I came to Thailand thinking that, again, oh, I'm such a good climber. I could do V4s in Japan. I can do 3Q. And I was humbled again. Because I realized this is another style. Thailand is not for the weak either. Especially Stonegoat is a hard gym. And it's a lovely gym. Massive space. So many different climbs. You can spend all day in there, and so many climbs to do. And they have 2 boards. They have the moon board and the kilter board, as well as the comp wall, a workout area in the top, 2 floors of just different walls, and even a cave. I have a whole video of climbing in Thailand if you guys want to check that out. But what I learned from Thailand is that, yeah, I climbed in Japan, but there still are amazing climbers everywhere in the world. I learned a lot and got stronger in Thailand just as much as, maybe not just as much as my time in Japan, but it boosted me up for sure. And I learned a lot. I got to practice on the kilter board. That was one of my favorite things to do. And then I started traveling to nearby Asian countries. I went to Vietnam, and I learned that even Vietnam gyms, they have their problems and their approaches to climbs. And there's difficult V4s there as well. After Vietnam, I went to the Philippines. One place I wanted to go in the Philippines was Manila, because Manila has multiple gyms. So I felt really strong in Manila. I went to the Beehive gyms, which is popular gyms there, and I was happy with the sends I was getting. The holds were there. It reminds me of like climbing in Korea a bit, minus the extreme coordination climbs. They have a few coordination climbs and things like that, but the holds feel good. It's a commercial gyms, friendly to new climbers, not as intimidating as B-Pump or things like that. So I really enjoyed climbing in the Philippines, in Manila, because it really showed me that I got stronger, and I was very proud of my progress and everything that I learned so far in the journey. After that, I was bouncing back and forth because I was deciding where I wanted to live. I wanted to live next to a climbing gym, obviously. So was that going to be the Philippines? Was that going to be Bangkok? Was that going to be Vietnam? The dream was Japan, but I learned after meeting people in Japan that it's not so easy living in Japan. Obviously, the process of getting there is hard, but also adjusting to the lifestyle, making a proper living. Those are all challenges that make Japan difficult. Not only learning the language. I like that I could live close enough to take a flight to Japan. I'm on this side of the world, so if I want to go and train, spend some time in Japan, I can. I chose the Philippines, specifically Mindanao, Davao, and they have a gym called B24, which is now my home gym, and I really love, because I went to this gym again. Oh, I'm a cocky climber. I went to Japan. I'm strong. I did a 3Q, and I went to this gym, and they have a crazy cave, tall cave. I learned that a lot of the route setters in this gym have been climbing rocks for decades, like a long time. So they're really, really, really strong rock climbers. And a lot of the styles in this gym emulate that. After I moved here, I've been climbing at B24 in the cave, which is my favorite now. I don't know how that happened. I went from being a Korea coordination lover to loving overhang. I think that's like my favorite now, is overhang climbing. And I love crimps more now. I love pinches. I love just building those strengths. And I have B24 to thank for that, because I definitely got stronger being here in this specific gym. And I'm glad I chose that. With bouldering, you become your environment. You become the gyms that are your home gyms. That is why Japanese climbers are so damn good, because they're in the best gyms in the world, breeding the best climbers in the world. As I was in Japan, I saw little kids, little future IFSC climbers going to these gyms, and their parents would just be watching them climb these extreme climbs. You could tell that that was their daily thing. They go to school, and then they go to the climbing gym. Not any climbing gym, they go to B-Pump Okikubo. And these little boys and little girls are out climbing me, a grown man. And it's humbling. But you understand that you become your environment, you become your gym. It's important. You become the process of your journey. We all are on our own journey. We all are working on different things. There's extremely good slab climbers. There's extremely good overhang climbers. There's extremely good dynamic climbers, like in Korea. But to be an overall great climber is something that even the IFC pro athletes are refining every single day, which proves that this journey, it never ends. And that's what I love about this sport. That's what I love about bouldering. My journey continues, of course. I got into my first competition, which I recorded recently, and now I route set at my home gym, which I'm so thankful that I got the opportunity. And I'm learning so much from route setting. It's making me a better climber. I read routes now, which is very important in climbing, is route reading. Looking at a route and thinking, what was the intended purpose of the person that designed this route, which is the route setter. And now I am that person, and I know what it feels like to make decisions in a gym, putting holds in different places because you want to teach the community and help the community grow how they do in Japan. So continue to follow me on this journey. Leave a comment on your own journey. What are your goals? What you love about bouldering? I'd love to talk about that. Follow me on Instagram. That's where I post more of my daily updates with bouldering. Thank you guys for watching, and subscribe.